Hello.
Hello. So that was the wrong way down to see the rest of the wall. And
Hello.
then we have to basically go up the stairs again to the round. Then we can go over there. And then we can come down here. I thought we could actually. Sorry guys.
It's okay. Jack, I take it back.
Tricky.
Just said we were listening to the German.
Nah.
There's a natural inclination for time here. Speaks to her. Says,
Yes and no.
Not too bad.
The natural inclination following suggestion of and down.
Oi.
Hallo. kayaking.